All right, welcome back, you guys. So things are getting really, really heated. Last time we left off, Bud finally meets Hermione Calloway, the man he is really sure that is his father. And they're having a conversation about where he came from and where he's supposed to belong. So we're on the top of page 152. And we're going to see how the rest of this conversation shakes out. Here we go. He raised his hand again to shut me up. "Hold on, Bud. Do me a favor. Go wait by that door for a minute." He pointed to the side of the stage. I walked over and waited to see what was going to happen. I tried pushing the door open a little bit in case I had to make a quick escape, but it was jammed tight. I'd have to leave out the same door I came in. The man named Jimmy and the guy who had been my daddy started whispering. After a while, Hermione Calloway raised his arms and said, "Hey, Bud, don't forget, this is your little red wagon. You pull it if you want." Jimmy said, "Fair enough." He waved me back onto the stage. "Bud," he said, "you look like you might be a little hungry. So I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're all done rehearsing, and we were about to head over to the Sweet Pea. You're invited to come along under one condition." "What, sir?" "Once you get something in your belly, you've got to be straight with me. You've got some explaining to do. We'll feed you, but you've got to tell us the truth. Do we have a deal?" He stuck out his hand for me to shake, but I wanted to know what I was getting myself into. "What's the Sweet Pea, sir?" "Best restaurant in Grand Rapids. Is it a deal?" I don't know how grown-ups can tell I'm always so doggone hungry, but I sure wasn't going to turn down getting my first real restaurant food. I grabbed his hand and made sure I gave it a hard squeeze like Mama told me to, and said, "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." He smiled. "No problem." Hermione Calloway said, "Well, James, like I said, if he's going to be doing some explaining, it's got to be to you. I don't need to listen to this scamp's nonsense while I'm trying to digest my supper." He stuck a pipe that wasn't lit into his mouth and walked off the stage. Shucks, if my father had to be so doggone old, I was starting to wish that Lefty Lewis or this Jimmy guy were him. Hermione Calloway seemed like he was going to be hard to get along with. The horn player said, "Little man, my name is Jimmy. Jimmy Wesley. You can call me Mr. Jimmy." "Yes, sir." He pointed to the younger men. "The drummer there is Doug the Thug Tennant. The sax man is Harrison Eddie Steady Patrick." The saxophone player said, "Aw, man, it's not Eddie Steady. It's Steady Eddie. Steady Eddie Patrick." Mr. Jimmy said, "Uh-huh. And on trombone, we have Chug Doo-Doo Bug Cross. And the palest member of the band on piano is Roy Dirty Deed Breed." He shook his head and said, "Lord knows why these young musicians can't just leave the perfectly good," turn the page, "names their mamas gave them alone. But for some reason they can't. Anyways, fellas, this here is Bud. What's your last name, Bud?" "Caldwell, sir." "This here's Bud Caldwell. He's going to be our guest over at the Sweet Pea for dinner. Y'all say hello to the little man and make him feel comfortable." The thug said, "What's the word, Bud?" Dirty Deed said, "How you doing?" Doo-Doo Bug said, "Welcome, little stuff." Steady Eddie said, "Good to meet you, my man." I said, "Pleased to meet you." Mr. Jimmy told them, "All right, he'll ride over with you four. Me and Herm will meet you there." The sax man, Steady Eddie, said, "All right, Mr. Jimmy, we'll finish up. All right, Mr. Jimmy, we'll finish loading up." The Jimmy guy went out the front door. The sax man told me, "Come on, little man. If Mr. Jimmy's going to spring you for supper, the least you can do is help load the car. Grab that case over there and put it in the trunk of the Buick out back." He pointed to a long, skinny black suitcase that had a leather handle on the top of it and said, "And be careful, that's my bread and butter in there." I must have looked confused because he told me, "That's my horn, my axe, my saxophone, the thing I make all my money with, so don't get butterfingers and drop it." Page 155. I said, "Oh, yes, sir." The trombone man, Doo-Doo Bug, said, "One thing you are going to have to drop, though, is all that 'sir' stuff. The only two folks around here old enough for you to be calling them 'sir' are Mr. Jimmy and," he winked, "your long-last dear old daddy." The whole band busted a gut laughing. The thug guy said, "I'm going to let you in on a little secret, my man. I think the only reason Mr. C is denying he's your daddy is 'cause you went and hurt his feelings." "How? I didn't do nothing to him." "There it is. That's just what I mean. Here you two are getting together for the first time, and you didn't show the man no love." He looked over at Doo-Doo Bug. "Bug, did you see any love being passed from this boy to his daddy?" Doo-Doo Bug said, "You leave me out of your nonsense." The thug kept going. "Shoot, man, seems to me like you should give this man his props. Seems to me like you should give the man a whole lot more affection. You see, I know Mr. C better than most folks do. I know that beneath that cold-hearted, evil, wicked, nasty, mean," Doo-Doo Bug said, "don't forget Cheap. Cheap's got to be in there somewhere." The thug said, "You know Cheap's right up high on the list." But as I was saying, beneath all that festering, turn the page, nastiness is a tender, kind, loving human being. Why, I'd bet you dollars to donuts that he's outside now waiting in that Packard, sobbing openly about how you shunned him. When you get to the Sweet Pea, rush right up and give him a big hug. Yell out, "Daddy!" Then plant a big, juicy kiss right on the top of his shiny, bald head. Shoot, you do that and you'll be in his will so quick your head will spin. I put this thug guy on my list of people not to pay any mind to. Hermione Calloway seemed like the kind of person that would rather get bit in the behind by a snaggletooth mule than have somebody give him a kiss. Steady Eddie said, "Let's not get the little man killed before he's had a chance to eat, thug. Son, I hope you've got sense enough to let what he's telling you go in one ear and find the nearest exit. You just steer clear of Mr. C for a while. He's not someone you want to toy with. And for God's sake, whatever you do, don't call him Daddy or Papa or anything that's going to give anyone the idea that you two are kin. You hear?" These guys really thought I was dumb. I said, "Yes, sir, but isn't it just like my luck to come clean across the state and find my daddy, and he turns out to be a mean old coot?" I slapped my hand over my mouth. I knew better than to say something like this out loud, but it just fell out of my mouth before I could swallow it down. This was Bud Caldwell's Rules and Things to Have a Funner Life to Make a Better Liar Out of Yourself, number 63. Rules and Things, number 63. Never, ever say something bad about someone you don't know, especially when you're around a bunch of strangers. You never can tell who might be kin to that person or who might be a lip-flapping, big-mouth spy. Sure enough, the drummer, the thug guy, started acting like he was writing stuff down on a piece of pretend paper. He said, "Let's see, was that mean old coot or old mean coot? Shoot, baby, if I drop some info like this on Mr. C, I might be able to stay in this band longer than the last 3 drummers did. You see, kid, you ain't the only one trying to get on Mr. C's good side. This is the best drumming gig in the state, and I need to hang on to it as long as I can." I wasn't sure if this drummer guy really was a dirty dog or if he was just a big teaser. Whichever way, I'd have to work real hard on remembering rules and things, number 68, or was it 63? Steady Eddie said, "Thug, you gonna have to lay off the kid's chops. The little man's got problems enough, and he sure don't need to have you meddling with him." Page 158. Let's get the car loaded. Me and, what's your name again, kid? Bud. Not Buddy. Just Bud, not Buddy. Right, me and Bud, not Buddy, are too dang hungry to hear any more of your lip. Of all the dusky devastators of the Depression, or Nubian Nights, Steady Eddie is my favorite. We loaded a bunch of funny-shaped black suitcases into the trunk of the big old black Buick, then climbed in. I got in the back seat and sat between Dirty Deed and Steady Eddie with my suitcase on my lap. Doo-Doo Bug got behind the steering wheel, and the thug got in beside him. The thug said, "So, Bud, not Buddy, I'ma come right out and ask what's on everyone else's mind. How'd you find out Mr. C was your daddy?" "My mother let me know." Thug said, I ain't trying to be funny, and I never played the dozens on no one. But let me ask you, was your mama, how can I put this? Was your mama as old as sand when she had you?" Steady Eddie said, "Man, leave this kid alone. You got no call to be prying into his life." I never minded talking about my mama, so I told the thug, "Yes, sir, she was pretty old when I was born." Thug said, "Shoot, I knew she had to be either old or crazy to have anything to do with that man. How old was she, 80? And was she blind?" I said, "No, sir, she was old, but her eyes didn't go bad yet. She was 20 when I was born, and she was 26 when she died." That news always kills any conversation you're having with old grown folks. The dusky devastators got as quiet as some mice with bedroom slippers on. The only sound you could hear for a second was the keys cling-clang-clinging up against the metal dashboard as Doo-Doo Bug turned the car into the front of a little house that had a sign saying "The Sweet Pea" on it. The thug said, "Things is hard all over, ain't they?" Steady Eddie said, "You're all right, little man. You're a tough little nut. I like that. Most folks your age would be bawling their eyes out if they got teased as hard as that fool drummer was teasing you. But you ain't even close to crying, are you?" I said, "No, sir. I don't know why, but my eyes don't cry no more." Steady Eddie said, "I like that. My eyes don't cry no more. You mind if I borrow that? That sounds like a great name for a song." I said, "No, sir. I don't mind at all." He reached over and rubbed his hand over my head and said, "Yeah, you're all right, little fella. And don't you worry none too much about that thug. Mr. C changes drummers the way most folks change their drawers. What you see in that front seat is a man on borrowed time." Thug said, "Oh, man, what did you hear?" Doo-Doo Dug cut the car off and said, "All right, gentlemen, that's enough. Let's go stuff our craws." Chapter 14, page 161. When we got into the restaurant, I could see that it was someone's living room. They'd set about 10 card tables and some folding chairs in. Every table but one was filled, and there were 5 or 6 people standing in the doorway waiting to sit down. We said, "Excuse us," and walked right past. Then the smell of the place got into my nose, and I could tell why folks were lining up to get in. I closed my eyes and took a big snort of air. It was like someone took an old pot and poured about 100, page 162, gallons of apple cider and 100 gallons of hot coffee into it, then stirred 8 or 9 sweet potato pies, crusts and all, into that, and then let 6 big steamy meatloaves float on top of all that, and then threw in a couple of handfuls of smashed potatoes, then boiled the whole thing on high. This must be exactly how heaven smells. I could tell by the smell that Mr. Jimmy was telling the truth when he said this was the best restaurant in Grand Rapids. Shucks, I've never eaten in one before, but I'd say this was the best restaurant in the world. I opened my eyes because the smell was starting to get me dizzy. On the other side of the room, Herman E. Calloway was sitting at a table with Mr. Jimmy and a woman. Steady Eddie pointed at the only empty table, one that had a sign saying Reserved NBC on top of it, and said, "That's where we're at. Go over there, bud. NBC stands for Nobody But Calloway." Mr. C changes the name of the band so much that no one can keep up with the new names, so they call us NBC, so they don't have to change the sign. Before I could sit down with them, Mr. Jimmy saw us and said, "Here they are," and pointed at me and waved for me to come over to sit to their table. Shucks, I'd rather sit with the band than with Herman E. Calloway. It would be hard to have a good time eating if you looked up and saw him every time you took a bite. I'm going to pause there and we'll pick up and see how the rest of this dinner goes.